Good afternoon. It is Wednesday, Thursday, the 19th of March. It's state and local government. We are here today for a work session on LD 1004. I am Sue Salisbury. I represent House District 128, which is part of Westbrook. And we'll go ahead and get the rest of the committee introduced. Representative Farron, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Wayne Farron from Jefferson, and I represent Alna, Wiscasset, and Whitefield, and also Jefferson, all in Lincoln County.
Good afternoon. I'm Representative Dave Rollins. I represent House 59 right here in the great city of Augusta.
Welcome. My name is Lynn Copeland, and I'm proud to represent the folks in House District 130, which is the beautiful town of Saco in York County.
Joseph Martin, Senate District 19. I represent in Oxford County, Andover, Bethel, Buckfield, Byron, Canton, Dixfield, Gilead, Greenwood, Hanover, Hartford, Lincoln Plantation, Lovell, McGalloway Plantation, Mexico, Milton Township, Newry, North Oxford, Peru, Roxbury, Rumford, South Oxford, Stoneham, Stowe, Sumner, Upton, West Paris, and Woodstock. But wait, there's more. In Franklin County, I represent Avon, Carthage, Copeland Plantation, Dallas Plantation, Eustis, Jay, North Franklin, unorganized territory, Phillips, Rangeley Plantation, Sandy River Plantation, South Franklin, unorganized territory, Temple, Weld, and West Central Franklin, unorganized territories. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Representative Will Toole. I represent House District 10. I'm not going to go through the extensive list as the good senator from Oxford did, but I can tell you I have roughly 24 towns and townships in central Washington County, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all today.
I'm Representative Adams. I represent the beautiful towns of Acton and Lebanon, District 144. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. I'm Kimberly Pomelo. I represent House 85, which is Standish.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, all. My name is Representative Randy Greenwood. I proudly represent my friends and neighbors in Litchfield, Monmouth, and my hometown of Wales, spanning both Androscoggin and Kennebec counties.
So we're joined by our analysts, Kristen and Sophie, our clerk, who's filling in today. We appreciate your help. Go ahead. So yesterday we did have the public hearing. This was originally a concept draft, and the actual bill, it should be in your folder, and we'll have Kristen take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as the chair kindly mentioned, this is LD 1004, an act to ensure the proper operation of the state, which was presented by Representative Moonen. This was a concept draft bill that was submitted pursuant to Joint Rule 208. And as an aside, as the chair mentioned, that yellow packet that was distributed yesterday is that concept draft amendment that was presented for the committee's consideration pursuant to Joint Rule 305. This amendment changes the title of and replaces the bill. Upon the adjournment sine die of the first special session of the 132nd Legislature on June 25th, 2025, the governor remained in possession of certain legislation finally enacted or passed by the legislature and presented to the governor. Pursuant to the Constitution of Maine, the final disposition of such legislation not signed by the governor was determined in January 2026 during the second regular session of the 132nd Legislature. As specifically described in each part of the concept draft amendment, the amendment is intended to update as necessary certain dates for implementation or reporting contained in such legislation held by the governor that became law in January of 2026. For public hearing information, the date of the public hearing was yesterday, March 18th. Just for background information, I cited the provision of the Constitution that was noted or referenced in the summary as well as in the sponsor's testimony. For additional information, if it is of assistance to the committee, each chaptered law or resolve in its full form that the sponsor's proposed amendment proposes changes to has been appended and distributed. For fiscal information for the sponsor's proposed concept draft amendment, not yet determined by OFPR, there is a green packet that was passed around similar to the chaptered laws or resolves. The fiscal information associated has also been distributed for the committee's information. If it may be helpful, there's also just this purple kind of table of contents, if that were to assist the committee, that kind of crosswalks the parts or sections in the concept draft to the entire chaptered law or resolve, if members have any questions.
Great, thank you for that. And I guess I do want to make a note in, we did receive testimony from the Director of Maine EMS, William O'Neill, regarding Section E, Part E, Section E through 3, regarding the EMS board. I did text him yesterday and just confirm he had written for us to not make any changes, but I did text back and forth with him and he is okay leaving the bill as presented. So ignoring what he sent to us and leaving the bill as it is. All right, any questions? Yes, Representative Tool.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I gotta be honest, I'm very conflicted with this bill. I appreciate the intent behind it. On the one hand, I see it is a errors and clarifications bill. On the other hand, we started in January. We had this bill sitting here for 2 months. Last week, we get the amendment. Here we are this week, piecing it together. So I gotta say, I'm a little sour on it, to be honest. But I don't want to hold anything up either. But I do want to work through that. And one thing I would say is if folks were willing to say, regardless of these bills before us, that this is just a fixed bill, we're not reiterating or taking a position on the bills, some of which were divided. I checked with Kristen before we all started and asked, and she had said that there were 12 of the 18 were divided reports. So if folks were willing to acknowledge that we're not relitigating those bills, I would be willing to support some form of this bill moving forward. Not warm and fuzzy about it, but would be willing to do it. And I just would, I guess I'll leave it there and would thank the committee and thank everyone for their work on it and leave it at that.
Thank you for that, Representative Toole. I do appreciate that and raising that concern. I think that's a valid point for you to make. And I think it, what the important point, taking that into consideration is these are all bills that are currently in law waiting to take effect. So they've already been passed. So I hear what you're saying, that you're not saying that you supported that those bills passed. So some of them you may not be in support of, but now that they are in chaptered law and will go into effect, that we're just making changes to what's already been voted on.
And I thank you for that. And I also have to say, the broader sense, we need to stop jamming the chief executive up with bills at the end of session and putting him or her, the future one, in the position of having 50, 60 bills to make a snap decision on and then being in this position. Whereas we are as much to blame as she is. And I'm not fond of our chief executive in a lot of ways, but on this, I gotta say, to be fair, we are as much to blame as she for the situation that transpired.
Great, thank you for that. Yep, Representative Greenwood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few weeks ago, I was made aware of another bill that I thought should have been included in this bill. And I found out yesterday the reasons why it wasn't included. But I think it's worth at least having an open discussion on what that remaining bill was. And then if the committee feels important that it should be added, at least have that discussion. But I will be upfront that the sponsor of that bill was not in support of including it. So if I might, for a couple of minutes, expound on that. All right. So the bill was LD 15. It was the excise tax on camper trailers. It doesn't affect motorhomes. It's only the tow behind trailers. It passed last year. And it's currently in chaptered law with an effective date of January 1, 2026. However, the issue is that bill was held by the chief executive. So now doesn't become effective until 90 days after adjournment. Now, if we are assuming adjournment will be April 15th, based on statutory adjournment date, then the effective date of that law would not be until July 15th. The concerns that I have from a municipal standpoint is when you register your camper between January and July 16th, you're paying the old rate, which is based on MSRP. When you register your camper after that date, 90 days after statutory adjournment, which is expected to be July 16th, then you would get the new rate, which would be significantly less than the current MSRP formula. The reason it was flagged was because if you register your camper before the new effective date, you're paying the old rate, which could be thousands of dollars. But if you register it after July 16th, it could be hundreds of dollars. So potentially causing the registrant to want to go back to their town and say, hey, you overcharged me, I want my money back. Well, there's no mechanism to do that because the law wasn't effective until July 16th, July 15th. Becoming aware of the details last night, not talking to the sponsor until just about an hour and a half ago. I did reach out to the Secretary of State's office. Deputy Secretary Kate McBrien was able to provide me with some statistical data as to how many people register and when they register, and I asked for it by month. So in 2026, for 2026 registrations, there's 14,106 registrations. All but about 2,500 are done before July. There is a simple way to fix this, which would be that we just make the effective date January 1, 2027 to be consistent when tax laws traditionally change. However, the sponsor's concern was, well, it's already in public law and anybody who waits till July 16th should get the new rate. So that's why it was not included in this bill. But I really think it's worth a discussion just from the committee, because we would have the ability to include it if we wanted to. Again, and it would be at the objection of the sponsor of the bill that is already passed. But I just think from a municipal standpoint, my town office has reached out to me. It's going to become an issue on July 16th if we don't fix it. And nobody will be able to re-register for at least a year because then you have to bring in the documentation to show the length of your camper trailer. So you can't just do the online registration. So it's going to drive everybody into the town office regardless. The question is, do you want to start driving them in July 16th or January 1st when it's a fresh tax year? So if anybody has questions, I'm able to expound on what I am trying to come across, but I just think it's important that we at least discuss it. Whether we include it or not, that'll be up to this committee, but I just want everybody to be on board.
I just had a quick question about the statistics. So 2,500, that's statewide. That's not, so statewide, 2,500 do it after July 1st.
Yeah, that is correct. And I can forward this to the analyst. She can pass along to everybody. I don't know that it'll help our decision right now, but it is broken down by month. And they even have some registered that are into 2027. So even have some of those numbers, but looking at 26, because they're a 1 year, all but like 2,500 are done before that date. People are doing their campers because they're looking for Memorial Day, they're looking for June, summer, 4th of July, that's when the bulk of people register. So if we were to decide to fix it, we're only excluding about 2,500 from seeing the benefit of the early lower tax. But again, causing a little ruckus in our town if we don't fix this.
Okay, questions, comments on that? Representative Tool?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and getting back to what I had said earlier about not taking a position on bills or such, I think for that reason, thinking about it since I first heard about this in our caucus prior to us starting, I would be inclined to include it because I think if we're legitimately fixing errors and we don't address this, then we are opening ourselves up. And I know the fix may not satisfy everybody, but I just think it's to be consistent. If we're truly just fixing errors, then it would be something to include. And I would support that.
Senator Martin?
I agree with Representative Tool, and I think that having it in the middle of the year, I know in my town, there'll be people screaming for rebates and they're not going to be able to get them if they've already paid. It's just going to turn into a real 3-minute after 3-minute after 3-minute show at the town meetings. And I would just assume, make a motion right now that we extend the tax until January 1st, 2027 to alleviate all the problems in all the towns and take care of it that way, as was stated by the good representatives. That's a motion.
I will second it as long as we are including the rest of the bill as outlined for us.
Yeah, that's good.
No, and I thought that was the case, but I just want to be clear to add this onto the list of bills that we have before us to be included in this errors omissions bill. So I will second that.
Yeah, so just to confirm, you're saying ought to pass as amended and the amendment is adding the LD 15 with this new start date being January 21st.
Including it into the other bills that we have right now.
All right, discussion, Representative Rollins?
Yeah, just to continue the impressions that people had before the motion. I agree with Representative Greenwood to Representative Toole to Representative Martin that it only makes common sense that we have a clean break on this. And it seems like a simple fix. So I know I, for one, would support this.
Representative Greenwood?
Yeah, like I said, I brought it up for a discussion. I not expecting it to become part of a motion. However, that being said, I personally think it should be included as well. And I would just defer to Kristen, because I know there was some language drafted in the original form to include it and then not. Can you just like read that so we know how that would sound if it was to be included?
Thank you for that question. So what I can speak to is that I do have LD 15 in front of me. I understand not to the benefit of other legislators, but I do have that in front of me. And what I can share is that bill, as enacted, has 3 sections to it. And in those 3 sections, only 2 of them have dates. In section 2, 2 of the bill, and then subsection 4 of a specific paragraph, there's an annual reporting not a reporting requirement, but it says annually beginning in 2027. It currently reads annually beginning in 2026 by September 15th. So I think that date has not been part of the discussion presently. It seems that section 3, the effective date of the chaptered law, is what was discussed in the chaptered law currently reads section 3 for effective date. This act takes effect January 1, 2026. If I understood the motion correctly, that would strike 2026 and insert the year 2027.
Representative Rollins?
Yeah, I thought a different approach. I thought the law is going to take effect, but this tax was going to start in 27. We can't start the law at all until 27? Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
That's no problem. Even though by her doing it, you're opening.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Does that answer your question? Very good. Yes, Kristen?
I think if it helps, just knowing that based on that discussion, just as I kind of think for the effective date, this act takes effect January 1, 2027. Perhaps then if the committee wanted to, for consistency's sake, I could change the other date that says annually beginning in 2020. Maybe that's a decision of the committee. I'm just trying to think whether or not that as a technical consideration. If there's a directive from the committee, I can follow it. If not, I can seek clarification later as to whether or not that's a technical concern, but.
Representative Green?
Yeah, no, I think we can tweak that at language review, but I think the intent is that this wouldn't become effective until January 1st, 2027. How we have to affect chaptered law, I think you can work that out. We can get that in language review. But I'm going to support the motion on the floor because I think it's best practice for my town. I don't know that it's going to be a unanimous report because I think there are some that, again, if we're going against the request of the sponsor of that, I respect that, and that's okay.
Can you just remind me again what the sponsor's concern was about changing the date?
Yeah, his concern was that the law is already passed and it's already current chaptered law. And that his position would be that anybody who registers after the effective date, which would be July 15th, 16th, somewhere in there, should get the benefit of the reduced tax rate for the remainder of the year. It just makes it difficult for the town offices. It makes it difficult for the Secretary of State's office to kind of reconcile all of these registrations because especially changing mid-month, that's even more horrific than actually, I mean, if it was a clean break at the end of a month, that might be different. But to change mid-month is just going to be disastrous, I think, for our towns.
All right, any other discussion on that? Any other questions? All right, we're ready to vote then. So we have ought to pass as amended.
Representative Tool,
Yes.
Representative Tool, yes. Representative Adams,
No.
Representative Adams, no. Representative Pomelo,
No.
Representative Pomelo, no. Representative Greenwood,
Yes.
Representative Greenwood, yes. Representative Salisbury,
Yes.
Representative Salisbury, yes. Senator Martin,
Yes.
Senator Martin, yes. Representative Copeland,
Yes.
Representative Copeland, yes. Representative Rollins.
Yay.
Representative Rollins, yay. Representative Farren.
Yay.
Representative Farren, yay. The motion of the votes ought to pass as amended. There's 7 in favor of the motion and 2 opposed.
And what's the minority report?
The minority report will be that we would want to go with the first amended report.
Kristen?
Thank you. And just to clarify, that would be the concept draft amendment as presented without this addition of LD 15. Thank you for confirming.
All right, thank you for that. All right, that is our last bill here in state and local government. Now we have some language reviews to do. Take it away.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I will work with Sophie, to get some items passed out for the committee's review. So
Okay, thank you so much. The first one looks like is LD 695.
That is correct, Madam Chair. So the first item for language view is LD 695. The title of the bill as printed, an act regarding the laws of the state of Maine. This was a concept draft amendment presented by Senator Peirce. The second page in the packet shows the committee vote sheet, so members can, I know there's going to be a lot of items, so if this is helpful, members can see which item they have here. So this was a three-way report. The first report was ought to pass as amended using the sponsor's concept draft amended as presented at the public hearing and using the sponsor's requested title change. So that you can see has been drafted starting on the third page in the packet, which took the sponsor's proposed amendment and made that requested title change. If it helps, I also appended the concept draft amendment as originally shared at the public hearing. The second report was also ought to pass as amended. That is one of two minority reports. That one was representative, the basis of that amendment was Representative Underwood's proposed amendment, which has been appended. And you can see that the amendment as written appears right before that previously distributed proposed amendment that was drafted to meet that intent. Certainly can give members on that report an opportunity to read through that. Having that reimbursement for handgun safety course as one of the sections in the bill, the second being a fee waiver specific to permits issued to a member of the legislature. And then the third was the carrying of a concealed handgun by legislators in capital area, and that language as presented there to meet that intent. The third as well was, the third item was also a minority report of ought to pass as amended. That was Representative Toole's amendment for the basis of that report, using Representative Toole's updated proposed amendment, or the most recent one that was emailed to members on March 5th and then distributed at the work session. That language is the last item in the packet as well.
Okay, great. Yes, Representative Toole.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Out of curiosity, I noticed the first amendment had the fiscal included of 150,000. And I realize it's probably not available as yet, but was curious to see if there'd been any information on the fiscal notes of the other two reports.
Thank you for that question, Representative Toole. And if it may be helpful to the fiscal piece that is included is placeholder text only from the sponsor from the kind of proposed amendment, which was carried over into that committee amendment for those on the report. So that doesn't have a formal analysis yet. This is the kind of the yellow draft of initial language. So a fiscal analysis has been, requested in normal course and will be whatever the result of that fiscal analysis will come forward for all the draft amendments.
Okay, no problem. Are there any other questions or concerns about this particular language review? Good. All right, great. Thank you.
LD 2092 is next. 2092, which is an act to update certain terms and references regarding information technology and cybersecurity. I'm sorry, there are a lot of folders and I do have a lot of packets coming around. So I'm sorry, I do empathize with the volume of papers.
Okay, go ahead there, Kristen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is LD 2092, as previously stated, with the title, An Act to Update Certain Terms and References Regarding Information Technology and Cybersecurity. This is a majority report ought to pass as amended. Of those registering a vote, the only other minority report was ought not to pass. So the amendment for this, if the committee may recall, if it's helpful, is that Deputy Commissioner Trundy passed out, which the committee warmly referred to as kind of an art project, where she had crossed out some of those sections and color coded and highlighted. So if that reference helps committee members recall that, so I have appended that. I apologize, it is in black and white, but I have appended that if members wanted to see that. The amendment that you see here is also a markup used in similar form, but it just shows word by word, line by line, what those changes were to offer increased clarity to the committee as to the final language. But the final language was to use the basis of Deputy Commissioner Trundy's proposed amendment. And just as a reminder, that was including some provisions or retaining some provisions. So when striking, just as a point of clarification or for the committee, is when you're striking it from the bill as printed, it would retain it in current law. The changes would be any underlines or pieces there. Due to the photocopier, they're just my handwritten summary on that page. The last line is just cut off. So I wrote it on the side margin if you're wondering why there's a little bit more handwriting on the side margin. But happy to answer any questions committee members may have for those on this report.
Any questions? All right, looks good. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. This item is LD 2009, an act to allow a political subdivision to enter into federal bankruptcy proceedings.
Okay, go ahead, Kristen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is LD 2009. The bill originally as printed reads an act to allow political subdivision to enter in a federal bankruptcy proceeding. This was a committee amendment, so all committee members had voted for the ought to pass as amended report here. If it may help for the committee to see on the very back page, starting kind of moving back in time, Senator Moore had presented a strike and replace kind of draft that she gave to the committee that the committee used as the basis for the ought to pass as amended report. At a previous language review, the committee saw that kind of proposed draft language put into a committee amendment, which you can see appended there. And then the final language appears in the committee amendment page that has been appended. I will flag for the committee just two items. And we are at that time in the session where there are a lot of requests moving back and forth, and we try to get as much in paper that we can in front of committee members while we're still meeting. So this is final language. There's still a pending fiscal. So when the fiscal does come back eventually, the committee will see it again with the fiscal component included, but this was an opportunity to review that language as drafted. One point of clarification, I think I met the committee's intent on this, but I wanted to absolutely make certain. The strike and replace that was used as the basis, the original bill had an emergency preamble. It was my understanding that the emergency preamble was not wished to carry forward, and it is drafted to meet that intent, but I just wanted to confirm. Thank you. I'm seeing members nod, so I'm grateful to learn that I interpreted that correctly. So thank you. So this is that for the committee's review.
And just to confirm, so this will have to come back to us when it does get a fiscal note before we can report it out.
That is correct. That is correct. And depending on whether the committee is able to or has chosen to meet in person for language review, you would see it then, or if electronic language review commences, you would then see it at that time.
Okay. Representative Tool.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would just note that we've also changed the title to clarify the requirements of a county audit. For those who may be listening, it's not about bankruptcy anymore. For those on the floor who may be confused, it's not about bankruptcy anymore. So I'm relieved to see that that title is changed and that change is reflected as well.
Any other questions or comments about this particular language review? Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item I have is LD 2148. In similar fashion, this is one, and I will certainly go through as members have it in front of them, that it is language final, but pending fiscal. I'm happy to share more when we get to that point. Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is LD 2148, an act to amend the laws governing the health insurance premium cap for state employees. The second page shows the vote sheet, so members can see this report as a reminder. For the majority report, I will note that that was ought to pass. So one point of clarification for the committee, certainly ought to pass is the bill as printed. you may recall last year when we moved to electronic language review, or in case we're not in person, I just wanted to receive confirmation from the committee that they would be okay with me changing it to ought to pass as amended if a fiscal comes back to incorporate it for those on the ought to pass report. You would see it, of course, at that time too.
Are you okay with that? If it's, so what she's saying is if we do get a fiscal note, so it would have to be changed to ought to pass as amended?
Ours is already on to pass as amended.
Yeah. So it would just
We
be,
would fall under a different umbrella.
yeah.
And thank you.
But if
So
it's just the fiscal note, then it would just be a different amended report. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, yeah.
okay. I just wanted to make sure that was okay. And you would also see the fiscal note and could proceed in any directive you choose. But that was just a permission to change it to ought to pass as amended to incorporate the fiscal if one comes back for that. The other report, I will note this is the committee amendment that is the ought to pass as amended, not the ought to pass report. You can see that that changes that percentage in the 10th line 13 in the LD, and that's changing the 10% to 6%. And the committee saw that draft previously, and the third report was ought not to pass.
All right, any other questions on that? Great, thank you.
Thank you, Sophie.
Okay, we're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is LD 1969. And if this helps for the committee, I have a couple items. You may recall this was the treasurer's bill. And the committee had authorized for the drafting of this amendment for me to work with the treasurer's office and then an authorized individual that had presented language at the work session that was at the time of the vote. So the committee had previously seen, and this was one that a number of handouts were passed out previously, but you can see the committee amendment from LD 1969 the committee previously looked at. Then you have, this is the kind of final language as presented. There's two remaining points of clarification I wanted to raise possibly for the committee, but also understanding that now that this has been distributed, this is a public document, and certainly I would be able to proceed in normal course with sending this to the treasurer's office as well as the authorized individual, again, where it is a public document, so that they are able to see the final product of the amendment that they provided assistance with. Because there's two pieces that were just items for further clarification. One was a cross-reference to a section that referenced a bank account, and the cross-reference ultimately did not have the word bank account. There was also a concern or an item raised around physical communication, if that were changed to paper communication, whether or not that would change anything. So with the committee's permission, I could share this and ask those two outstanding questions, as well as any other changes that were technically made, of course, after the committee's review. But I could proceed with that to seek their clarification regarding those kind of outstanding pieces.
That would be great. Yes. Any concerns about her sharing that document? Okay, wonderful.
Thank you. If any of those technical or possible concerns are raised, I would bring back any language that needs to be changed for the committee's review and consideration.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So LD 2214 was an act to confirm and finalize the boundary between the town of Kittery and the town of York. LD 2214. The amendment for this, I will note for members. You can find, also this is a committee amendment, so all members registering a vote, which was all committee members, are on this report. You may note it was just to add an emergency preamble. So the committee last week previously took a look at that draft emergency preamble language, which has been added into the final committee amendment, I think with just some technical changes of changing it to a numeral representation of 2 rather than the word 2 that I had written out. But I believe those were actually the only changes from the last time the committee had an opportunity to look at initial language.
Will all of the data from the original bill, because the committee amendment doesn't reprint it, is it included
Thank you for
in
that.
statute? in
Yeah,
public
thank
law?
you for that. Yeah, when it's finally enacted, it will include, yeah, the committee amendment just shows the changes to the bill as printed, but if ultimately, chaptered to reflect the way that it looks now with that amendment, or yes, it would have all those pieces in the chaptered law. Yes, I do this. I think it's a 216 or 116 point, or 120. Yeah, I do know what you're talking about. It was the 216 points of latitude and longitude, or 219, I believe. Yes.
219.
Great. Any concerns or questions about this particular language review? Good, thank you.
This last one is LD 2042 for members as you get your folders together. Oh, I apologize. You actually might not have this. I was able to get this, actually, I received this a little earlier today. This is the eliminate requirements for municipalities to provide public notice in a newspaper. I appended all previously distributed materials, but certainly happy to set it aside if committees, members need their folder. I apologize, that one I had not requested.
Any questions about this particular bill and this language review?
This was the agreed upon.
Yeah, this is the agreed.
Yeah, this was the agreed upon language. Again, I want to state on the record, I don't think this bill completes the intent of what the original bill was. But this is a step forward. And that's why we supported it. But you can probably expect a similar bill to come forward next session to address the intent of the original bill.
Representative Copeland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at the pink packet that was just sent out on the inside page. It says that you don't have to publish it in paper.
That was the original focus of the bill.
But
That was the bill. And we had an agreement with the newspapers and municipalities, and this was the final agreement that they came back with.
so look at the committee event.
Yep, this is our committee amendment that we worked out.
Thank you. If I may be helpful. So the top bill is the bill as printed, which has changed. The second page in the packet is the vote sheet for members on that report. That starting in the third page is that kind of final committee amendment that that changes some of the provisions there that were in the printed bill. I will also note, just as a helpful reminder, the committee directed at language review last time to change the title or just swap out that word eliminate and change it to clarify. So I did write that in my handwriting there for the committee's benefit to see from the original OPLA language that you took a look at last time. So the very last page of the packet is the proposed amendment from the stakeholders that came to the work session that the committee used as the basis for the amendment. That second to last page in the packet is the committee's original kind of amendment first drafted. Then you're seeing the amendment as finally drafted here before the bill is printed.
Representative Copeland, do you see that amendment, the wording of that amendment towards the back of your packet there?
The very last page.
The very last page will show.
Yeah, right. Yes, that's the item for language review today. That's kind of the final version of the committee amendment for the committee's review today.
Any other questions regarding this particular language review? Okay, great. Yes, Kristen.
Just one housekeeping item, and I will defer to the chair too, for any further directives for the committee, but just knowing that we may be entering a possible season of electronic language review, just reminding members that there will be, timelines initially. There will be a larger time frame from when I'm sending out the amendment for review to when I, then am in a position where I need to report it out. But that timeline will change perhaps as session continues and gets closer to drawing to a close. And I will do my very best to always make sure I'm communicating that timeline in bold in any communications I'm sending, and using kind of uniform email communications to help in searching for those items in your inbox. The only other thing to think about too there is, generally speaking, this is what the committee chose to do last session. And if it also is the consent of the committee this time, similar to what I had just discussed with those on that ought to passes report there, I don't believe, I think that was the only one that I had flagged, that there is a possibility that there was an ought to pass report that may have a fiscal that comes back that would need to be changed to ought to pass as amended. It is my understanding all the other items would be ought to pass as amended anyway, so that portion would not be applicable, but just wanted to flag that technical item if I had the committee's permission for such a circumstance.
Go ahead, Barb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for the chair. Would the chair be willing to, well, as we do language reviews, our side would prefer to have printed copies. And since we're in session every day, if we could get them on the color that they're supposed to be. And we prefer to meet as a caucus in person. And then one of us will respond, approved or so on. But it's just easier for us rather than searching through emails. If we could have printed copies, and we'll pick them up and we'll make sure that our side caucuses accordingly. But
As long as that works for our analysts, then that's totally fine. Yeah.
Certainly, and I can even have it sent to members' desks if that would be helpful too. So on a session day that you can expect that to see at your desk.
even better.
Yeah, and you can, if you don't mind doing that for the full committee, that would be
Oh,
great.
certainly. I'll do
Yeah.
that for every member like we would any other item.
Yeah, that would be great. And then, we can do the same. We can, have members reach out to,
I'll be the lead on our side.
on our side. And then for the Democrats, if you can reach out to me and just let me know if you have any concerns, or if not, yeah, that would be fine. If you don't mind doing that, that would be great.
Certainly.
And yes, you do have permission to, if it's ought to pass as amended because of a fiscal note, I don't think anybody has any issue with changing that final report. Representative Tool?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I noticed we have on our desks, we have LD 1059 sitting here as well. Is there more to be done with that, or is that a wrong file?
Thank you. If I may, sometimes I proactively request files just in case, and I have no items to share for that today.
All right, great. So we'll look for more language reviews, which will be coming in. Keep a close eye on those. If anything comes up, keep in touch. And we have been given permission to have a team gathering on March 31st between 12 and 2. So watch for details about where and when and what.
Have a confirmation.
We do have a confirmation hearing on that day, so it's probably going to be here. Anyway, more to come. Stay tuned for March 31st, what we're doing and where we're doing it.